for Fairfax.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. And a fish rots from the head. Fish rots from the head. I can only assume that the member opposite who has just spoken has totally swallowed the Kool-Aid from the Leader of the Opposition in what is either a dishonest or an economically clueless presentation of the facts, or somebody else wrote his speech. Now, I noticed that he only left the last 5 minutes of his speech to actually talk about the budget, which is what this session is meant to be all about, instead wanting to talk about another topic altogether. Once he got to talking about the budget, of course, his favourite word is cuts. It's cuts. And yet again, the facts tell a very different story. And it was mentioned today, actually, Deputy Speaker, in the House by both the Prime Minister and then the Minister for Health, the ads that are being run in the seat of Longman in Queensland, because there's a by-election looming, being run by the Labor Party, suggesting that there have actually been cuts to hospitals. Whereas, yet again, and the Minister laid the facts down in the House, in fact, the state Labor government has decreased funding to hospitals. The Coalition has increased funding. But this is what the Labor Party does, Deputy Speaker. Absolute dishonesties. You can't have it both ways. Either you are economically illiterate or you are dishonest. And I put to this chamber that the speech we just heard from the opposing member was full of absolute dishonesties. And the losers through that are in fact the Australian people who believe such concoctions. The very people who are vulnerable, who need assistance, whether it be in health, in welfare, in education, once they swallow the rot that has set in, their fears escalate, their anxiety escalate. And it's the Australian people who are living decent lives who get affected by Labor's lies. And so let's just look, Deputy Speaker, at this budget, firstly from where we have come. And we've come a long way. We've come, of course, from on the back of that disastrous Rudd-Gillard-Rudd era. It almost gives a shiver down the spine when you think of what they did to this country. Of course, they inherited a $15.6 billion credit. No debt from the Howard government. We're in credit, $15.6 billion. What did they do? They, of course, just racked up on a spendathon, deficit after deficit, and leaving us with well over $200 billion in debt. Now, Labor, of course, also left us endless commitments for the Commonwealth to oblige. And that, again, has put pressure on this coalition government. But we are on path to bringing common sense and economic stability back, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Australian economy is now looking strong in our 27th consecutive year of economic growth. GDP and government receipts are up. Our lowest rate of growth in spending in 50 years. So as a percentage of GDP, costs are down. Receipts up, costs are down. What this means is the deficit can narrow, and then we are on path to a surplus. So a $14.5 billion deficit forecast for the next financial year. That in the year after will turn into a $2.2 billion surplus, and then at the end of the forward estimates, we're looking at $16.6 billion in surplus. Now, we also know that the strength of the Australian economy has seen us maintain our AAA credit rating, despite the fact that compared to most other countries in the world, we are so highly exposed to international trade and our borrowings are so highly exposed to the international market, and yet we maintain our AAA credit rating. Over 1 million jobs created in the last year. Since we came to office in 2013. Over the last year, well over 1,000 jobs every single day. Business confidence is building, and it's no wonder the IMF has upgraded their ratings for the Australian economy. But, Deputy Speaker, there is no room for complacency, and the budget demonstrates an ongoing commitment at the national level. We're delivering tax relief to hard-working Australians, ensuring that taxes will be lower, they'll be fairer and they will be flatter. Supporting business to invest and create more jobs with our enterprise tax plan. Of course, we understand the FTAs that have been signed off under the Abbott government and then under the Turnbull government, and our $75 billion transport infrastructure plan. We're guaranteeing the essential services that Australians rely on. Now, we're talking here about $24.5 billion in extra school funding. $24.5 billion in extra school funding. Now, the opposition call that a cut, but most people will understand when more money actually goes into something, that's not a cut. That's called additional funding, Deputy Speaker. Of course, we have record hospital funding, record Medicare funding, new drugs added to the PBS, nearly 1 million families supported by the government's new childcare package due in July this year, helping older Australians stay in their own homes longer, adding an extra 14,000 home care packages over 4 years on top of the 6,000 places last December. We're continuing to keep Australians safe. $294 million to boost airport security, including $50 million for specialised security upgrades at regional airports, and over $160 million to help law enforcement and security agencies fight crime and terrorism. I ask you, Deputy Speaker, and anyone else in the chamber, did the Leader of the Opposition even talk security in his budget reply speech? Did he mention the importance of protecting our borders? Not a thing. Absolute silence, Deputy Speaker. And this again shows the priorities of the Labor Party compared to the Coalition. Now, Queensland is a big winner. Queensland is a big winner out of this budget. Over $20 billion for infrastructure. Over $5 billion announced on new projects. Now, that includes an extra $3.3 billion for the Bruce Highway. At the moment, until the budget speech from the Treasurer, there was $6.7 billion of federal funding for the Bruce Highway. This contribution means that we now have $10 billion for Queensland's Bruce Highway. Queensland hospitals will receive $429.5 billion over the next 5 years. Now, that is a real funding increase of 34% over the previous 5 years. Record levels of support for Queensland schools, $52.2 billion over 10 years, and of course, fully funding the NDIS will help support nearly 96,300 Queenslanders with a disability. And then, of course, Deputy Speaker, there's that wonderful, wonderful place in the world called the Sunshine Coast. Never before in our history has the Sunshine Coast been the recipient of so much federal government funding. Let me underscore that by saying it yet again, Deputy Speaker. Never in our history has the Sunshine Coast ever received so much funding from a federal government. And this budget was almost custom-made for the Sunshine Coast. Because what we saw was an amazing trifecta of infrastructure spending for the Sunshine Coast, Deputy Speaker. We saw that in over $2 billion of spending for our region. We saw $800 million go towards Section D between Cooroy and Curra. We saw $880 million between Pine Rivers and Caloundra. And of course, when it comes to rail, Deputy Speaker, $390 million contributed to the upgrade of the North Coast line between Beerburrum and Nambour. Over $2 billion in this one budget of this coalition government assisting the region of the Sunshine Coast. And this comes on top of course, an existing $1.6 billion that's already being spent and committed to the Bruce Highway in that stretch. This comes on top of the $181 million concessional loan for the Sunshine Coast Airport, so it can become a fully fledged international airport. There is nothing that growing, successful regions need more from a federal government than assistance with vital infrastructure. Infrastructure that not only gets people and products from A to B, but attracts investment as a result to those regions. And that is precisely what this government is doing for the region of the Sunshine Coast. In addition to that trifecta of $2 billion of infrastructure, we have 70 schools across the region of the Sunshine Coast, 70 schools. And they are set to benefit with students, with more money per student for the next 10 years. More money per student for the next 10 years. Yet again, those 70 schools on the Sunshine Coast are being looked after by this Turnbull coalition government. What's more, Deputy Speaker, there has been another commitment made in this budget to extend the chaplaincy services. And I'm delighted about this because the chaplains play a vital role in schools across the Sunshine Coast. The United Scripture Union runs the chaplaincy services in Queensland, and those chappies, the impact they have with young people in schools is nothing short of first class. And again, this budget delivers because it ensures that young people in schools who can always go and have a chat to a chappie, well, that chappie is going to still be there. And that commitment has been made right across the forward estimates. Nearly 40,000 small and medium businesses on the Sunshine Coast, Deputy Speaker. 40,000. Now, these are small and medium businesses that are already enjoying a company tax cut. Businesses that, as a result, have either more money in their pocket, more money investing in their business, or more money employing other people. And this is where the rubber hits the road with the coalition's plans, because they are always pragmatic plans, Deputy Speaker. They work out there in the real economy. And this is where we have seen 40,000 small and medium businesses enjoying company tax cuts on the Sunshine Coast. And as we saw in this budget, an extension of the $20,000 instant asset write-off. The amount of businesses, Deputy Speaker, I've spoken to, Deputy Speaker, is extraordinary, where you go in, you have a chat, and they want practical assistance. This instant asset write-off has been a miracle for some of them. And there's around 5,000 that have already leveraged this in my part of the world. And of course, it remains open to 40,000. Over 126,000 people, over 126,000 residents on the Sunshine Coast will enjoy tax relief. Immediate tax relief, Deputy Speaker. And with all the pressures on individuals and on families at the moment, this tax relief is going to count. And of course we know that this tax relief for low and medium income earners is but step one in a 3-step, 7-year tax plan that will ensure that we have a tax system in Australia that is flatter, simpler and fairer. And then, of course, Deputy Speaker, there are approximately 4,932, I'm told, 4,932 people with a disability on the Sunshine Coast. So that's nearly 5,000 people, probably 5,000 families, who have the peace of mind knowing that the NDIS is fully funded. It's a reminder, Deputy Speaker, that the economy is not the end game. It's the means to an end. And only with a strong economy do we have the ability to guarantee NDIS. Only with a strong economy do we have the ability to guarantee health funding. Only with a strong economy can we guarantee the safety net of welfare. Only with a strong economy can we ensure that our students are educated, that our young people are given their best chance in the world. It's only with a strong economy. And so with that, Deputy Speaker, I'm delighted to stand today and to fully endorse the budget that the Treasurer has brought down, and I look forward to seeing whether or not the Labor Party come to their senses and support the measures in it.